All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is Steve Wilson. I'm with the Illinois State Water Survey, and you're attending Septic Systems 101, which is a webinar put on by the private well class and from the Water Survey and the Water Resources Center at the University of Illinois. Thanks for attending today. This program is funded through the US EPA with funding to RCAP, the Rural Community Assistance Partnership, who we're a partner with and works with us on the whole private well class program. RCAP is the lead agency or lead organization working on this. We work as a partner with them, and it's to support private well owners. It's funded through EPA, as I mentioned, and the materials today, or at least some, follow the material in our private well class program, which is 10 lessons. And I'll talk more about that later. We are recording this video. This will be available on our website under the video section and also on YouTube on our YouTube page, probably in a week or less. So, and everyone who's on the webinar today had a chance to ask questions in advance. We'll get to those as part of the slide deck here. But if you have any questions today that come up during the webinar or that you just thought of and you'd like answered, we will deal with those at the very end. And we've, Katie Hollenbeck, which I'll mention in a second, is collecting those from your question or chat box, if you will. And I also want to mention there is a handout listed on your GoToWebinar page or your little GoToWebinar box. There's a handout column, and that handout is for CEUs if you're a sanitarian. NEHA is providing an hour and a half of credit for this webinar if you are a registered sanitarian through NEHA. So with that, I do want to mention I'm a groundwater hydrologist, so most of my time is spent at the State Water Survey working with well owners. We house the well logs for the state. We have a public service lab that does sampling for well owners. And I have with me today Jim Starbird, who is with RCAP Solutions. He's a licensed sanitarian. For a number of years, he worked at a Massachusetts local health district and as a septic inspector, and now he is a technical assistance and training provider with RCAP Solutions, which is one of the RCAP regional affiliates. And Massachusetts has a lot of, was just out there in January, and they have a lot of rules and a lot of things going on with their septic systems in that area. So Jim's got a lot of experience, and hopefully he's going to be able to answer all your questions that I can't. And also Katie Hollenbeck, who's with the Water Resources Center here at the U of I. She's the person who's going to collect the questions you asked today in the question or chat box. And she's actually going to put those in a Google Doc that I'll share on screen at the end of the day here so that we can answer those. Okay, so most of we're going to talk about, we're just going to talk about conventional septic systems. Those that have they're basically a wastewater treatment system. They have to be managed and maintained just like your well does, and if not, they can stop functioning, or they can cause water quality problems, especially locally to shallow groundwater. And so these are natural systems. They use the bacteria from our bodies to whenever everything from our showers and sinks and bathrooms goes into the septic tank. The bacteria break things down, and eventually the liquid part goes out into your septic drain field, where it can infiltrate naturally into the groundwater system and into the soil and be broken down. So the tank itself separates the solids, and it also gives the bacteria time to break down that material. And so the tank serves a really important purpose. It's kind of a separator, if you will. The heavy solids fall at the bottom, the light solids float on top, and the liquid can leave through a piping system, and that's the part that gets broken down, and the other has to be pumped. And so we hear all the time from people, I've never had to pump my septic system, and all I can tell you is that's not something to be proud of. Eventually that's going to come back to bite you because your septic tank will eventually fill up and will get clogged in that case. So here's a diagram. This is a little blurry, I apologize. of a two-compartment system. So the house is on the left. There's a line coming into the septic tank. This is a two-compartment tank, so most of the solids are falling out on the front side. Then it can go through that baffle into the second side where more stuff falls out. It's degraded further, and then as that fills up with water or in liquid, it eventually runs out through the other end of the tank into a drain field, either through a junction box or a series of pipes. And most of the time, if you have a drain field, or this is called here, they call the soil absorption field, it's perforated pipe, it's spread out over the area, it's installed, it usually has a gravel layer so that water can seep out easily, and then it slowly percolates down through the soil and where it's remediated by bugs and broken down. You can see in this diagram that in the front tank, there are more solids at the bottom and there's more things floating on top. There's an access port on both sides to actually pump that out. And I'm going to mention NESE several times here, the National Environmental Services Center. They have a lot of web information available on septic systems. So here's just another view. This is a single tank, which is probably more common. There's an inspection port, and then there's a riser for a clean out port, if you will. Again, the scum layer is the stuff that floats, and the sludge is on the bottom. And the idea is your outlet pipe is set so that just the liquid that's being broken, it's broken down. Most of the material in there is what goes out through your outlet. And then the diagram on the right shows a distribution box or junction box, what I usually call them, with an absorption field in the trenched area with sand in the bottom so that the water can percolate down into the soil. Over 25 million homes have septic systems in the U.S., and that number might be low. I know, I think the EPA estimates 1 in 5, and so that's a lot of septic systems out there. So in every one of these, if they aren't working properly, or if material's allowed to, if they're leaking or any of those things, could be a source of contamination, especially for your well if you're on a private well as well. So when they fail, most of the time you're going to know it. Either the area around the tank or drain field, the grass will start getting thicker and greener because it's getting more nutrients. And then eventually a pool of water will form if it's percolating up out above the tank and form a pond around either your tank or in the yard. And usually that smells. It's very observable. And in the worst case, and this happens a lot more frequently than most people realize, your tank gets plugged, and especially if you have a basement, that can end up coming up through your basement toilet or shower because it's all plugged, and it's going to, the pressure is going to cause that to happen. And so to prevent that, one is maintaining your septic system, pumping it when you need to, understanding what you're putting into your septic system and all those things, which we'll go over. So as far as septic systems go, really it's about designing your system properly if you're putting in a new one. Unfortunately, most folks who buy a home that already has a tank and a private well on it, you're not installing your own unless you're putting in a new home. You need to make sure it's sized correctly, and I'll show you a diagram in a few minutes about at least what NESE has as kind of a table of guidelines for the size of the tank versus the number of folks living there. But in many cases, you may have 2 people living at a home, they sell it, a family moves in, now they've got 4 or 5, and in that case, their septic system may not be designed to properly handle that many people. Really, it's about public health protection. As far as the location, these days, we're fortunate to have enough rules in place around the country that folks like Jim are, when he was working for the health department, they're inspecting the plans for a new home and where a septic system is going to go in, and they're signing off on that to make sure that the well's in the right place, the neighbor's well isn't too close, that there's a plan for trying to minimize the risk of the drain field or anything coming from the septic contaminating a well. And as far as maintenance, one of the big issues is really that folks just don't realize that they need to do that. Every year we do this webinar in July, and we get 15 or 20 people who ask, hey, how do I find my septic tank? And so what that tells us is that if folks don't even know where their tank is, that they're probably not doing the proper maintenance and understand what the needs are for their tank. As far as sizing and designing, size of drain field matters. It also needs to be designed properly depending on where you're at. You have areas of the country where there's plenty of soil and bedrock may be at several hundred feet. We have a number of other areas where bedrock's at the surface or within a foot or two, and a conventional system really just doesn't work. I know I was out in New York a couple of summers ago looking at an area where there was a lot of E. coli hits in private wells, and it turned out that it's a fairly dense area of wells and septic, and the bedrock aquifer that everyone's using for their water supply was between 6 inches and a few feet of ground surface. So basically, the tank and the drain field are discharging directly into an aquifer, and obviously that's a very bad situation. The other thing we see with older systems are where they're near a river or a stream, and they've got a straight line running out. They don't really have a drain field. They're just letting it discharge into that stream. That's illegal, and it's also bad for the environment, and it doesn't give things a chance to break down. And so those are very bad situations, if you will. And as far as public health concerns regarding that, as I mentioned, it's illegal. There's a lot of new regulations. You should really be aware of those things. It's better to take care of it under your own premise of doing so than having something happen and you get a fine, or depending on where you're at, what the rules are. And also knowing how close all your neighbors, if you have neighbors close by. One of the examples I use a lot in our private well other webinars is if you're in a rural subdivision that's on a slope going down towards a river, and everyone's on shallow wells and shallow septic, then the person who's at the highest point, likely water's flowing towards the river from there. So unless you're that last home that's furthest away, you're likely have potential for contamination from the neighbors that are upstream, so to speak, of you. So understanding groundwater flow direction and what the natural groundwater flow is based on landscape, if you have a shallow well, are all important things to keep in mind. And also, there are cases where your well is really deep, and knowing where your water enters your well basically goes to the fact of whether you have a bedrock well or a sand and gravel well. Typically, a sand and gravel well has a screen at a given interval. So for instance, a 200-foot sand and gravel well likely has a screen in the bottom 5 feet or so. So that means the water can only get in the well from 195 feet to 200 feet of that well. Whereas a bedrock well, typically you construct a bedrock well, you seat the casing just 10 feet into the rock. So a 200-foot well could, it depends on how deep it is actually to bedrock. If bedrock's only 30 feet, you might only have 40 feet of casing. If bedrock's at 120 feet, then you might have 130 feet of casing, which is certainly better. But again, going back to the New York example, we ran into a number of wells up there where the casing was only 13 feet below land surface, and that stopped. And even though some of these wells were 80 over 100 feet deep, there's only casing to 13 feet. After that, it's an open hole. The bedrock acts as its own casing because it's solid rock, and you're taking advantage of the fractures so that you can get water into your well with a bedrock well. But that also means that you're only 13 feet from land surface, so anything that infiltrates into the ground can also get into your well, and that comes into play the same for your septic. If it's that kind of geology, then there's more chance that some of the water coming from your septic system may not be as treated and may be able to get, it's just more of a risk. That's just the thing to keep in mind. Remember, they're like anything else, they'll eventually fail. But if you manage them properly, you can certainly prolong that. We see septic systems that are 70, 80 years old. We see some that have to be replaced after 20 years because they haven't been taken care of. You need to have them pumped on a schedule based on the size and the number of people that are using that system, and not only that, but also your use. So depending if you're using it in a normal fashion, you can really cause problems by, as I said before, a septic system works by having the bacteria in the tank break down all the material that's coming in. So, you don't put toxics down your drain. You don't put pharmaceuticals. If someone's on amoxicillin, for instance, you have a kid who's on amoxicillin, you don't know what to do with what's left over, and you put it in your toilet, that kills bacteria. So it's a bad thing to put into your septic. So the other side of that is things that'll fill up your tank. So cat litter, grease, coffee grounds. There's a long list of those things that if you add them to your system, you're losing capacity, and you're also causing that to fill up with solids much faster. I'll probably mention it here later, but the other thing would be a garbage disposal. Those solids typically from a garbage disposal don't get broken down. They end up just filling the bottom of your tank up, and we'll talk about that more later. So there's a whole set of best practices on a number of websites that we'll go through that you should follow, and that's the best way to maintain your system and make sure that it's working properly. This is again from the NESE, but this is just one example. This is one guide on, and they got this from Pennsylvania Extension. Then there's just a chart here. I think we had a question from one of the participants today. There's 2 of us on our home. We have a 1,000-gallon tank. How often should we pump it? Well, according to this, it would be every 5.9 years. And if you have a garbage disposal, I would cut that in half. And I'd also have it inspected probably in the middle of that, just to be sure that there aren't more solids in there than you think. And again, it depends on your use. If you're cooking at home every day and you're using a lot of vegetables and everything else, then maybe even less time if, again, you have a garbage disposal. But this is a guideline that gives you an idea of how fast your tank would typically fill up with solids. And so it's just something you can use. So on your to-do list, maintain the area around your tank and drain field. So you should have an inspection port and a manhole. Make sure there's no, we see where people have covered up their drain field with concrete, or they're driving tractors over it. All of that compresses the soil, and it can affect how your drain field works. So we recommend, trees get into sewer lines and septic lines and can cause cracks. They can even get into your tank, especially the older concrete tanks that may already have cracks in them. And so it's best just to have grass and not to drive over it. It's the bottom line. As far as, your tank works by bacteria having time to break down the material that comes into the tank. So if you have a sump pump or a whirlpool or softener, and you're continually loading those things into your septic system, that doesn't give the bacteria time to break things down, and it's not going to be as effective. So you're probably putting more harmful material out in the environment. So it's best to have a separate line for those, and not to discharge those through your septic. As I mentioned before, garbage disposals dramatically increase solids. And so, we can talk about additives in a little bit. I think that's one of the questions. But a lot of folks sell additives to put in septic systems, saying that they'll make them work better, or they say add yeast, or all those things. If your system is used properly and you're not putting things that don't belong in your septic system, you don't need any of that stuff. It's a natural system. It's meant to work, and it works the best just by reducing the amount of water as much as you can, going through it so it's time to break things down, and not putting things in there that don't belong. So, and again, inspecting your tank regularly is just a good idea. You may have more in there than you think, or there may be some issue that it points out, and it's better to be safe than sorry. There's even maintenance schedules that you can get on with some contractors. Jim can talk about that later as far as addressing the value of those. But, if you're not aware or really sure, the best thing is to check it out and be sure and get advice. So there's a lot of information available. I mentioned the National Environmental Services Center. If you go on their main web page, instead of using the one I have down here at the bottom, which is a little long, but if you just look up National Environmental Services Center and get to their main page, you can type in septic, and it'll take you here. They've got a lot of resources available for well owners. And I wanted to mention too, the University of Minnesota developed this tool that is, to me, this is actually more for your contractor, but it's allow you to create a PDF of like an owner's guide for how to use your septic system. And it has a lot of information in it on different types of septic systems, but it also provides recommendations for O&M, for operation and maintenance, and allows you to print that out and keep it as a well owner. When the person from Minnesota gave this presentation at NEHA last year, she talked about that some of the contractors were actually using their own logo on it. It's set up so that it's, and they can hand that then to every time they install a septic system. But it gives you as a septic owner a way to, if you can find out the information about your septic system, at least a good idea of what you need to do so that it covers, like it says here, it has a lot of information on specific types of systems. So there's also mobile resources. A few years ago, or 2 years ago, I guess, the National Rural Water Association developed this app called Septic Insight. I downloaded it, played with it a little bit, and I took some screenshots, and that's what you're looking at here. And so I guess this was, they built this in 2014. And actually, to me, I don't use the app anymore. If there's something you're looking for, like how to measure the size of your tank, or if you want to put in a schedule, that's one thing. But, once you've located your tank and you've measured the size of your tank, then those pieces of this app really aren't beneficial. So there's a few things in here about maintenance that might be handy to have on your phone, but there's just as much information available online. And what I'm going to show you next is the EPA's website, which, most of the things you need for understanding your septic system are available there. And I don't know that it's worth having the app unless you want those kind of reminders, like so that it pops up every 2 years or 3 years to tell you to either pump it or to get an inspection done. I would use Outlook for that. So here's some more stuff here. You can kind of do this quiz to find out what issues you might have. There are links here, although the link to the EPA Septic Smart, I'm sure it probably redirects, but they've changed their site. And so there's some of those things there, but it kind of gives you an idea if you do your own inspection, what you might be concerned with. So yeah, it's up to you. You can look it up on the App Store on Google Play. I want to show this. This is what we showed last year on our webinar, and this was the Septic Smart page that EPA had. And I just show this because they've completely redone this. And I want to point out that if you haven't been to the EPA site recently, you really should go take a look. They've changed the way they link to everything so that it's much more intuitive. This particular page on septic systems is just epa.gov/septic, so it's really easy to get to, and it links to a lot of other information. I put a yellow box around on-site decentralized systems because I didn't want to forget to mention that, what I call a septic system that I grew up on, nowadays most of the technical terms are either on-site or decentralized. And that's versus a centralized wastewater system, which is the water treatment plant in a community. So if you're searching for information, you don't just look at septic systems, also search for on-site and decentralized in your search, or try different kinds of searches. I know I'm inquisitive about things like that, and you'll always find more and different information when you do so. So I just want to, that's kind of the technical term. I just want to make sure everyone was aware. But what we're interested in today is the Septic Smart Homeowners part of this page. And some of the technical resources are really about they have webcasts that are, some of those would probably be useful to a homeowner, but most of those are really for like installers and technical folks or TA providers who are helping well owners and septic owners, and technical information like that. There is a button which I didn't include in the rest of these slides on funding that might be beneficial. You can see that there. So if you go to this page, if you click on the homes under Septic Smart Homeowners, it takes you to this page, which you can see on the left. how your septic system works, why we maintain it, how to care for it, all that information. It's really worth going through, and this is the place I'd tell you to start if you're wanting to get more resources on septic systems. On our well owner, or on our private well class lessons, those 10 lessons, which I'll talk about in a minute, we touch on septic systems, but our program is really about private wells, and there's other programs that are dealing with septic issues. So we didn't include a lot in that material. There's much more here, and it's much more extensive, and it's certainly worth a look. So I'm going to go through a few of these things. So for instance, how to care for your septic system. You can go down, scroll down. This goes a long way down and has a bunch of different information. Like I said, it's very intuitive. It's easy to use. I wanted to point out, a few years ago they had a guide. It was a 9-page guide. It's still available. I know one of the EPA staff was at the NEHA meeting in the National Environmental Health Association meeting earlier this month and mentioned that they're developing a new guidebook. But to find the one that was developed in 2012, go to Outreach Toolkit and you'll come up to this page. And if you scroll down the page, you'll eventually see where it says Homeowners Guide, and you click on that and you can download this 9-page guide. And again, I believe they're redoing that booklet, but it's not out yet. So it's really helpful. It walks through in a lot more detail issues you might have, troubleshooting things, as well as why it's important to maintain your septic system. And this is page 8. It talks about what causes failures, things that are cloggers and killers in your system. So it's a good resource, and it's something. It's for really everyone who has a septic system should probably at least read through it and understand it. So there's additional resources. The bottom bullet under Septic Smart Homeowners, and I point this out because the third one is protecting your private drinking water well. And I mentioned before they've changed these pages around, so now they're more connected, if you will. And so when you click on that third link, it takes you to the private well page, which has a lot of its own information. And under related links on the right, the top one there, it says free private well training. That actually goes back to the private well class. They also have information from the National Groundwater Association, the Water Systems Council, wellowner.org, and I believe the bottom link is actually to RCAP Solutions private well page. So, and lastly, the state resources link at the bottom, if you click on that, it takes you to this interactive map. And if you click on any state or go over to the menu and use the drop down, it'll take you to a page for your state. I live in Illinois, so I clicked on Illinois, and it takes you to our Illinois Department of Public Health, which is the agency in Illinois that licenses drillers and sets our well construction code. But it also has resources over on the side, over here on the right side. So for instance, the State Geological Survey and Water Survey are listed over here, and we have an interactive map where you can see all your well logs, and we have a domestic well database, and we also have a public service lab. So this gives well owners in Illinois, a one-stop place to find more local information, if you will. And transitioning into that, if you'd rather talk to somebody, these are probably the best places to go. Talk to your county or your local public health department, or co-op extension, or if you have, if you've worked with a licensed septic inspector or installer in your area, or ask one of those folks if they recommend anyone. I know some of the counties or some of the local health departments, if they have a contractor that they've used for inspections, where they have a little more interaction with those guys and know a little more about them, they might be willing to give a recommendation. Others probably won't. They don't want to play favorites, and that's certainly understandable as well. But you don't know unless you ask. And so the whole key of all this is learning where to find information and knowing who to contact. So that's the best way to gain. And no question, every question is worthwhile, and all of these folks want to help. And that's the last part of that, I guess, is that, their job is to help keep you safe and to give you information. And so, you should lean on them when you can. Okay, so we received a bunch of questions for today, And so what we're going to do for the rest of our time is go through some of those. And there's a few that we've answered as an email or as a slide here, and the rest Jim's going to answer for us. I just have the questions listed. And so yeah, if you have a question that's come up today that you want to ask, again, use the chat box or the question box, and Katie's tracking those, and we'll get to those at the end. And if you asked a specific question about your state or the rules in your state, we weren't going to look all those up for today and answer a question about a specific state when there's folks from all over the country on the call. But if you'll email us at info@privatewellclass.org, we will certainly get back to you. So part of our role and with our grant is to provide that support. So and we gladly will help you. Okay. So the first one, it's always a really hot topic. Do additives help my system? Yeast, commercial septic chemicals. And we wrote a blog post about this. It looks like last year in February. And you can go to the Private Well Class page, look under resources, and find our blog. It says partner blog. But then you can just search for septic additives, and this will come up. And the bottom line is, should additives help? I mean, should I use additives in my septic system? And you can read through that. We also provide some resources and links. There's a huge market for additives. I think there's like 1,200 different types of additives that you can buy. All the research and all the work done by experts in the field to look at this issue basically say that there's no reason to use any of them. If you're using your tank properly, you're not putting too much water through it, you're not putting things that are toxic in your system, and you let the bacteria do their job, your system is designed to work the way it's built, and you shouldn't need any additives. Some folks spend a lot of money on those things, and it's probably not necessary. So you can look through that and see the resources we provided. This, again, is from Nessie. It talks about work that's been done. That's where I got the 1,200 additive products. And now this is a few years old, but it still holds true today. And so you can find out information. I think we linked to another source on that blog post as well. Is softener backwash harmful to a septic system? One state, actually Rhode Island, I believe, actually has rules on this, because it certainly can be, depending on the brine, and it's just recommended that it not be put through a septic system. And they've actually got a guide. We had somebody from the Water Quality Association talk to us about this, where there's no evidence that it actually does harm. One of the things, though, is if depending on how often it backwashes, it's adding a lot of extra water to your system. And so it's just not a good idea. And they've also got this best management practices for discharge of softener backwash, and it lists a lot of good information here if yours is hooked up that way. So if you want more information on that or want a copy of either of these documents, email us and I'll send it to you. And yeah, it's the bottom line is it's probably best not to have that hooked up for the health of your system. Okay, so one of the questions we got here is, we replaced a leaking septic tank a year ago and still testing positive for coliform. They have a filter and a UV system, which is ultraviolet light, which should kill any bacteria that are in line. And they said they were very careful about how they collected the sample to make sure they didn't contaminate it. So the question they asked was, should they resample or disinfect first? And I would recommend that you disinfect your system first. And it could be an issue that it wasn't disinfected properly once everything was installed and everything was in place. So if you go to our webpage and look under resources, there's a list of documents that are freely available for each of the 10 lessons. And under lesson 10 is a well disinfection guide from Minnesota Department of Health. We've looked at probably 70 or more of those type of documents on how to disinfect your well, and we feel that the Minnesota document is the best one of all those. It's complete. It's got pictures. It's got tables on how to mix the chlorine. It just has a lot of good safety practices, And if you're not comfortable disinfecting your own well, then you should call a contractor and have them do it for you. But if you look under lesson 10, you can see that information. Even, basically your equipment, your filter and your UV system should have information on how to disinfect those as well. And it may be that you need to, if you don't have that information or you've lost it, the Water Quality Association probably can get you information on those practices, or the manufacturer. And the WQA's email or website is just wqa.org. So once you've done all that, you let it sit overnight and do things so that there's chlorine in the lines and through all the taps and the shower heads and toilets and everything else. Then, flush everything or get all the chlorine out of there, and then you should be able to resample. And it should not have anything in it. If it still does, and you put your UV system back online, then there's either a problem. Well, there's definitely a problem with your UV system, because it should kill anything that's coming through. But that also means that there has to be a source still, and it either means that the septic system originally wasn't really the problem, or there's another source that you're not accounting for. And, what we tell folks who run into a situation where no matter how many times they disinfect, they still have coliform coming back time and time again, you really only have two choices. You can either drill a different well somewhere that's further away or away from everything, and you're assuming then it would be safe and not contaminated, or you can add a continuous system. And that's why this one is such a unique problem, because what we'd recommend is either adding continuous chlorine or UV in order to kill any bacteria that might be coming into your home. So I'd be interested to hear, if you do these things, what you found and if it worked. And if not, let us know. There's RCAP staff all over the country who would be glad. Folks like Jim, who also works with well owners one-on-one, who would be able to come out and possibly help you out, at least try to determine what the problem might be. So how often should I pump my 1,000-gallon tank with 2 people? I already answered this, so I'll move on, but basically 5.9 years according to this guide. So maybe every 5 years, unless you have a garbage disposal, and then maybe I'd cut that down to every 2 or so, depending on how you're using it. But if you have your tank inspected or have someone come out and check the sludge level in your tank, just 1 or 2 times over that period, you'll have a better idea of how your tank is filling up and whether this guide fits for you or not. Okay, so Jim, are you still on the line?
Yes, I am, Steve.
All right, so I'd like to introduce Jim Starbird. He's with RCAP Solutions. He's in Massachusetts. He's actually part of the group of RCAP staff that are working around the country on private well issues through our EPA grant. And so I'm just going to let Jim answer the rest of these questions, since he is a licensed sanitarian and was a septic inspector with one of the health departments in Massachusetts prior to joining RCAP. So, Jim, what's the life expectancy for a septic system?
Well, it's really tough to put an actual number on it. I've seen numbers from 15 years. I've seen numbers to 50 to 75 years. And in my experience, I've seen cesspools that are over 100 years old that were functioning as they were designed 100 years ago. I've also seen septic systems that were installed 10 years ago with the latest regulations that are failing. So it really depends on, I think, 2 factors, which would be the installation and the planning that went before the installation. Most importantly, the depth to groundwater, how far between the bottom of that septic leach field where the water is released to where the highest groundwater table is. You want to have a national minimum of 2 feet. Here in Massachusetts, the minimum 4 feet, and a lot of boards of health actually gone to 6 feet, depending on their soil, especially down at the Cape where it's very sandy. So it really depends on the installation, the oversight during that installation, as well as what you've talked about quite a lot is the use. What you put down there, are you flushing solids down there like coffee grounds. You have a garbage disposal. You're not keeping up with the pumping. So all those will have factors depending on the life of the expectancy. During the pumping, they should be able to at least look into the tank as well, let you know what's going on there as far as visually. Is it operating what we call operating level, which is the level of the water in the septic tank should be constant at a certain level. Below it, it kind of shows that you have a leak or something's going on with your flow. Above it means the leach field isn't accepting the water as it should be done. So I think that's kind of my answer to that, but there's no easy answer to it. But with proper maintenance, it could outlast you.
All right. So what can be done about a septic field that is clogged with grease? There was more to this question, but basically they said they want to know what they can put into their septic system to get in and clean out the grease that's clogged their septic field.
Okay. I think the first thing you got to make sure is it definitely grease that's clogging this field, or is it the water table is up above where the septic effluent is coming out of the leach field? There's no way to fix that, other than to put a new leach field in. You can even bring in clean material to mound it up above where the water table is. But that's your first thing, is make sure, is it definitely grease? It also could be biomass too, which is a naturally occurring thing that happens in septic systems. As the naturally occurring bacteria there and die off, they almost become a mat underneath where the effluent comes out, and sometimes that can clog too, leading to issues. Now, I have seen technologies out there, the number of companies that have technologies, and some are approved by the state. Here in Mass in Rhode Island, the technologies to be used have to be approved, so I would definitely look at your state or at least your county health department and ask these companies first. But basically what these technologies usually have is the addition of oxygen into your septic tank or your distribution box to up the oxygen, which helps grow bacteria, as well as a proprietary blend of bacteria they would add to it that they say attacks that grease that was causing the flow issue. Like I said, I would definitely see if there's at least a good reputation for these, if not approved technology with the locale or the state that you're in. And to prevent future instances of grease other than just the pumping, you may consider putting what's called a T-filter on the effluent and the flowing out end of your septic tank. So little piece of plastic inserts right into the T-filter that leaves the septic tank. And the one thing about that is that then it has to be maintained, or that can clog and cause a backup. But it will pick up any solids and any extra grease particles before it makes it into your distribution box and or your septic leach field.
That sounds a lot cheaper than redoing your septic field.
It is, but maintenance is key because it's going to have to be cleaned more than it's going to have to be, your septic system is going to be pumped. So at least, once a year, maybe even 6 months, depending on use, you have to get in there and get that tea out. But it rarely comes out. You spray it with a garden hose to take any of the solids that are built up there, and you just insert it back in. But it's just an extra measure to make sure that any solids or any grease don't make it out of your septic tank. Everything is there.
The other good advice would probably be not to put grease down your system.
That would be, yes. That'd be the obvious one, yes.
Yeah. All right. So how do you know when it's time to clean your septic tank? I guess, are there any ways to know other than just monitoring the solids in your tank?
That would be a major way is I know, Steve, you presented charts. Some of this, I will say, in some parts of Rhode Island, actually quite a bit of Rhode Island, the local municipalities have ordinances that require the pumping and inspection of septic tanks for any homeowner within every 2 years. So there may be local or state regulations depending on where you live, the sensitivity of the sensitivity of the environment around. Most of these areas that implemented that issue of the mandatory every 2-year pumping are close to the ocean or close to a tributary that goes to the ocean. They're trying to keep down nitrogen and phosphate levels, et cetera, like that. So there may be regulations that would tell you when you have to do it. Another thing would be is when you have your pumper come, whatever your routine time would be is, if you just to ask them, could I have waited another year or two? And if nothing's changed, the situation is the same flow, same number of people living in the home, then, maybe you can extend it up the next time to the next 2 to 3 years and just kind of see how it works from there. Because there is negatives to pumping too much as well, because you're removing all those good bacteria that are breaking down the waste. There will still be a residual there to help reseed, but it takes a while for the septic tank to, basically reseeding, get those bacteria back to the levels that they were prior to pumping. Another hint might be too, if you can hold off pumping to spring, early summer, as opposed to do it in the fall, if you live in a colder climate, because once again the temperature will impact the bacteria's ability to regenerate itself. In summertime, they'll regenerate a lot quicker.
Yeah, I think it's a lot different out east than it is as you move west to the Midwest and to the West as far as the rules for some of those things. So, okay. I left this in from the last time because this is a really good question, and no one asked this today, but what questions would you ask a professional to be sure you're hiring a competent person to inspect your system?
The first thing would be experiences, and also, I imagine your neighbors also have to use septic professionals. So I'd definitely ask your neighbors for reviews and recommendations. Most of these places will either require some sort of licensure to inspect systems. And here in Massachusetts, as well as Rhode Island, you're required to have a license to inspect this. So I would definitely check into if there's a local or state law that requires them to be licensed individuals, and definitely check their license. And also, usually a county or a local health department will keep a list of licensed individuals that service the area. It won't be a recommendation list. They won't recommend anyone, but it will be more so of here's the list of the people who like to work in this area and been pre-screened, if you will, that they're licensed. But it won't be a recommendation on their work. But they'll all be required to meet the same requirements of the inspection when they do it. The one thing I would definitely say when you're inspecting your system, when they come to inspect your system, is to make sure they open every manhole in your whole system. Open up, whether it be 2 or 3 manholes in your septic tank. If there's a D-box, they open that up to inspect each and every one to make sure all the components inside are functioning as corrected. Nothing's corroding, nothing's leaking. The seals going into the septic tank aren't leaking, which you don't want an inflow of groundwater in times of rain. You want the tank to be completely watertight until it gets to the leach field area. So definitely, check out those references before, and then once they're there and they're doing the inspection, make sure they're opening up every part of that septic system, make sure that they're getting a good look inside.
Great. Are there any special concerns for a septic system that's only used once a month over a weekend?
Yes. A septic tank and system is really made, like we've been talking about, to have bacteria build up and come to a level that they can eat the waste that has been generated by the household. If you're only feeding the bacteria once a month, you're never going to get to that level of the bacteria count you're looking for without a constant flow, as well as the temperature of the tank increases with water coming from a residential setting. And all these will affect the bacteria and their ability to grow and come to a level to treat the wastewater correctly.
Wow. Yeah, I wanted to know that myself. Thanks. So someone asked, do we need a drainage system for our septic that's on a bluff 100 feet from the river? They actually mentioned the river, so I know where they live, but yeah, I thought this was worth bringing up.
I would say yes. Most of the codes up here wouldn't allow it within 50 feet of the river. One of the major concerns being a river is flooding, of course. You don't want your leach field to be in an area that's going to flood over, so that is a major concern. Also, the depth of groundwater. Anytime you're near a waterway or wetland, you might not have the groundwater depth that's required where you are. You want a minimum of 2 feet nationally, but more the better before to get down to the highest groundwater tables. So you also have the setbacks. There is a lot of what they call innovative and alternative technologies that will help you make a leach field smaller blueprint, if you will, smaller footprint, I mean. So there is ways but those usually have to be approved state by state, sometimes municipality to municipality. So there's ways to do that. There's also what they call a tight tank. It's not an ideal situation, but it's kind of a last resort for a pre-existing structure that's having a septic issue, and it's basically a septic tank without a way out. And there's an alarm when it gets to 3/4 full that will alarm back into the home, and it'll tell the homeowner that it's time to pump, and then at that time, a septic truck would have to come and pump the system. It's not an ideal situation, but it is a situation that I've seen done on a pre-existing structure that just didn't have any other issues in any other way to meet the current code.
Wow. That's actually, a good idea. So.
Yeah, it's very pricey, trucking the septic flow as much as, but if they go low flow and, it's a manageable thing, I guess.
Sure. Well, it's better than the alternative in that maybe, like in Rhode Island, they could condemn the home, I believe. Okay, so what should sellers and buyers know in a real estate transaction?
I would recommend anybody who's going to buy real estate to have, and as the septic system president, to have it inspected by a licensed professional, whether it be licensure in that state or county that you're in, or maybe even a registered engineer within that state, which I imagine every state has. And really, like I stated before, go through the whole system. Inside, make sure there's no water softeners connected to the system, sub pumps, etc. So open up every section of every manhole for the system through the septic tank, the D-box, as well as take a good look at that leach field, pull the records, make sure that they have the proper setbacks to the current code, to if there's a well present, the neighbor's wells, the neighbor's septic systems, wetlands, etc. So I definitely have them do the due diligence. Here in Massachusetts, we actually have a law for any real estate transaction. Licensed Title V inspection is required within 2 years of that purchase going through. And it's a seller's responsibility here to have it. So a system like that is in place, but if it's not in your municipality, I would see if there's a licensed individual and or an engineer would go through the whole system. But I would definitely make sure everything is taken, and you do your due diligence to make sure everything is right before you sign on the dotted line.
All right. Hey, going back to the question about a home that's only used once a month,
yes.
What should they do in that case?
It's really tough because there's not much you can really do other than try not to overfeed that system when you're there and low flow it, and hopefully don't have a party when you invite 50, 75 people over, and all of a sudden the system that got nothing gets a month's worth of flow in 2 days. I've actually seen it in coastal Maine that there's systems that are right on the water, and they rent out the house during the summertime. They have summer rentals for the week, and people will rent the house and invite the whole family in a system that really had no one there all winter. And it's, you're really just used to the summer, a couple of weeks by the owner, and then he rents it out a few weeks here and there. That all of a sudden they get the flow, and the system actually failed and came up to the surface, and a little bit near the wetlands, etc. So it is a concern like that. So I would say just don't try to overtax the system as much as possible, because it's not ready to accept that flow. And that's the major concern too is, a lot of these are seasonals and you have a big 4th of July party and that system just can't handle the flow. It's just not, it's not warmed up basically.
And there's a lot of those around. I know we go down to Missouri fishing in the spring and stay at these little cottages that aren't used all winter. And then there's tons of people there for 6 months, and then there's no one again. So, all right. They'd asked a follow-up question in our question box, so I thought we'd go ahead and answer it. Thank you. So how do you determine how can I determine where my drain lines are if the county has no records?
Sometimes you can see visual cues on the pumps in the lawn, not like green, but know where the rest of the ground, the loom they put around the system settled down, but the gravel, etc., they put down for the leach field pipe did not. So sometimes you can see visual cues like that. Also follow the pipe out of the house, usually a straight line. So follow where the waste line comes out, especially if you know the septic tank is probably only 5 or 10 feet in front of there. And, in Massachusetts, it only has to be 18-inch cover on them. So it's not really that deep sometimes, so they could dig lightly around the area. And maybe half the time, usually you don't have to even uncover the pipe, but you can see the gravel pack that they put on top of it. So those might be that'd probably be the best way to do it. But I would, if you are going to dig very gently. You don't want, sometimes I've seen leach fields that are still clay pipe, and you don't want to break it with a shovel.
No doubt. So this last question, there's more. It was more to it, but basically, I think this is a county sanitarian where they're using a dye test to show that their system is failing, and the question they're really asking, do they have to really prove it with the dye test, or shouldn't they be able to tell by the observable smell or appearance that yes, your system is failing and things are coming up to the surface?
In my experience in Massachusetts, the odor or appearance of wastewater surfacing is an automatic failure. A dye test would be definitely a way to further that. So I would say either one of those would work, but any evidence of surfacing in the leach field is a failure in Rhode Island as well as Massachusetts. So in my opinion, it would be a failure, yes.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So that's the questions that we've answered from what we got so far. I want to talk a little bit about the private well class, and then we have a couple questions that folks have asked today. And if anyone else has questions that's on the call, feel free to type those into the question box, and Katie will list those, and we'll do them at the end. But I want to give everyone a little bit of information about our class. If you haven't taken it, it's a series of 10 lessons. You can go to privatewellclass.org where you sign up for this webinar in theory, and sign up there. There's a lot of information available besides the 10 lessons. And again, it's really focused on your well, but we also include information from all the webinars that we do, and we do a webinar every month on different topics. And so those are recorded like the one we are recording today, and you should be able to go back and see any of those if you're interested. If you have questions, we have a phone number and an email address, and I want to just point that out again. We get a lot of questions, and we try to answer every one. Some we might forward to someone like Jim if it's in his area, or if it's relative to a state agency or some other topic, we handle it that way. But yeah, that's what we're here for. So these lessons cover everything from the first couple lessons are about how water moves through the ground and gets in your well, to common problems, why does my pump cycle on and off, all the way to testing and sample results and issues with treatment. If you add treatment, those sorts of things. So it's certainly worth going through the whole thing. It's self-paced. You're really on your own. The way it's set up, when you sign up for the class, it sends you one lesson a week for 10 weeks. So this is our front page. If you click on Learn by Email, it takes you to this page where you can sign up. We just need your email address, and first name just so the email is directed to somebody, and where you live is basically for us and for EPA who funds us to ensure that we're actually reaching out to folks all over the country. And, that's our mission, is to provide this material nationwide. We've actually had folks from probably about 20 other countries take our class as well. And so it's been pretty well received. I mentioned these videos. So here's a webinar from what EHPs need to know about private wells, environmental health professionals. So we target some of the stakeholders that you as a well owner may work with to give them more information as well. That's why NEHA, the National Environmental Health Association, is one of our partners so that we can help those folks learn more about private wells and those issues, so that whenever you call them, they're better prepared to work with you. And we get questions from sanitarians as much as we do from well owners sometimes. So use us. That's the bottom line there. We also created a bunch of short videos on different topics. There's 16 of these. There's one is, how does my private water system work or well system work? How does my pressure tank work? What do I do after a fire or a flood? One of these videos, we put these all out in January of 2016, and the one on pressure tanks has had over 100,000 views already. And so what we've learned by that is basically that there's a lot of people who have pressure issues and want to know more about their pressure tanks, and also that there's probably not a lot of other information out there, and there probably needs to be more related to dealing with pressure tank issues. So if you are not a well owner, but you're a stakeholder that works with well owners, either a sanitarian or extension or a regulator, whatever, we have a newsletter that goes out once a month that's not for well owners. It's really meant for professionals. And you can sign up on our partners page, and basically signing up just means that we're going to send you a newsletter every month. It's free. Everything that we do here is free because we're funded by EPA, and that's really nice to be able to offer all this material that way. And so if you want to put a link on our website, there's resources to do that on the bottom of this page. And it's just, there's a lot of information available. This is one of the newsletters from February of 16 when we launched the private well class. We actually have a version of our class that's on NEHA's webpage. It includes quiz questions, so that sanitarians can take the class there and actually get CEU credit for it, for their NEHA accreditation. And so there's a lot of things that we're in the middle of trying to basically raise the bar on what folks know and are being taught about their wells and well-related issues around the country. So we've only got 2 questions that I see here, and so I'm just going to slide this over, and we're just going to continue. Hang on one second. Let me move this over. There we go. Hopefully everybody can see that. Okay, so is there a specific distance trees can be planted near a leach field? Jim?
I have never seen a code for this. I would recommend not planting them near your leach field, though, because a tree is going to produce quite a lot of roots, and like any piping that could go into your septic tank, into your leach field piping, and damage them. So I would recommend keeping them at least 50 feet from your leach field, and basically any part of your home, really, because it could go into your foundation, it could go into your water line, your well. So I would try to keep a tree far away from your leach field. I personally plant grass on top of a leach area.
Yeah, we just had a situation, we were contacted in Virginia where someone with a PVC well planted a big tree right next to their well, and eventually the roots grew enough that it cracked the casing and caused coliform problems for them. So, yeah, they're just not a good idea. Next question, how much space is required in general for the absorption drain field with a traditional septic system? That's for you too.
Yeah. Top of my head, it's going to go by minute. It's going to go by really what we call here a depot and berth test, and it's really to evaluate the site, how far you get the groundwater table, what kind of soil you're dealing with, and from that soil comparison is how big a bleach field you need, and it's all basically on flow as well too, and how many, which is based on bedrooms. So there's no easy answer to that, and each municipality or state or county is going to have different regulations on that, but I guess the easy answer is it varies based on a number of conditions.
All right. And you can see Katie was doing some typing there. The last question really deals with the CEs. Actually, if you would email us. Yeah, and if you look at your GoToWebinar box over here, there's a handout tab, and if you go to that, you can download that handout. But if you contact us, we can get you that information as well. So Jim, do you have anything else? I think we're done today.
No.
So yeah, we ended a little short today, but I appreciate everyone's time. And if you have any further questions, Katie's highlighted the info@privatewellclass.org. Certainly send us an email. We'll get back to you. And yeah, thanks for your time. And Jim, thank you very much for participating today. And I don't know if we've set the date for our next webinar or not, but it'll be sometime in August. So you can check out on our website. There's a webinars and events tab, and it'll tell you what is coming up next for us. So thanks again. And with that, we're going to end the webinar.